I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your family's wealth, your health, your happiness, the happiness of your friends and neighbors. We try to do it with a little bit of humor. I know sometimes it's difficult to find the humor in environmental stories, but we do manage to find it sometimes, especially with the help of Rebecca Wood, my co-host, who will be joining us after the bottom of the hour. This show, normally we do this show from the studio, and we have all the resources of the studio. For example, the poet in residence for the station. Sometimes I like to go just hang out with her in her office because she's got the coolest office in the whole radio station complex there, with gifts and art from all over the world. And but this time, because of COVID, we're all doing our shows from our living rooms. It's hard to get that same sense that you're involved in something fantastic. So I wear my suit every week. I'd like to dress up, and I'm asking people if they would send me ties because I ran out of all my cool ties that I was wearing, and last week we had a very nice solar-themed tie someone sent me. And this week I got a tie showing a character whose copywritten name I don't have permission to use, but it's an adult male who possesses the powers of an arachnid tie. So it's very nice. Thank you very much to the person whose tie this is. We're doing it. So we're here, and we're going to have, as I said, we're going to hear from our sponsors at the bottom of the hour. Rebecca Wood's going to call in. We're going to have some eco news and views, and then we're going to have our letter from the future, which is a regular series we do here where my great-great-granddaughter Marie I is writing to us from the year 2300 when we've got all this eco stuff figured out, when we're no longer arguing about the basic functions we need to change, environmentally speaking, in order to survive as a society. And we know this is going to happen because if we don't make those changes, there won't be a society. It'll collapse. And there's a story, one of the stories we're going to talk about at the bottom of the hour demonstrates this very clearly, shows it up very clearly. And one thing that I'm very clearly happy about this past week, and my own personal news here, our solar power system is finally up and running. We had run into some technical problems with the inverter, and it took a little while. There was about a week there where everything was hooked up, but I could not actually just throw the switch. I couldn't actually connect to the grid. We're doing it. Where the power is actually flowing back into the grid as of this morning, according to the meter on my house that measures power going in and power going out. my household has put 18 kilowatt hours on the grid, which we will receive from the city of Bowling Green. It has a municipal utility, and we're going to receive 6 cents a kilowatt hour for that. So this system has already earned over $1 after only being hooked up for a couple days. And of course, you're like, oh, only $1, but it also, before it put power back on the grid, it was also meeting all the power needs of my house at the time. It only puts the excess power back on the grid. So not only was I earning the 6 cents that 18 kilowatt hours of excess produced, but I was also saving, as in I didn't have to pay the full retail cost for any kilowatt hours during that time because my solar panels are meeting all the house's needs. And that's the key to making this part of a successful retirement strategy, eliminating my electric bill, plus generating a little bit of revenue, which is nice. And, you might say $1 over a couple of days. I believe the system went up on Thursday, and here it is Sunday morning just after dawn. You might say, oh, $1 over that amount of time, that's next to nothing. But remember, these panels are warranted for 25 years, and evidence shows that they can last literally as long as 40 or 50 years at producing almost full power. So over the course of decades, those dollars every day or every couple of days, those dollars add up, and in the long run, you end up making a lot more money. You end up making back everything you invested in it, plus a whole bunch more. And this is sort of a principle of doing things sustainably. When you do things sustainably, when you approach your economy, when you approach your resource use sustainably, usually you do not get a lot of big returns right off the bat. Sustainability is not a get-rich-quick scheme. But in the long run, you actually end up with more profit. You actually end up wealthier than had you tried to pursue some sort of exploitative policy that would get you lots of money right up front, but then you've wrecked the environment that supported you, and so you end up getting poorer. I think one of the best examples of this actually is up in Michigan with the Menominee Indian tribe. They have a heavily forested reservation up there in the Menominee tribe, and it literally sits right next to a national forest. Now, the national forest is being harvested according to quote-unquote traditional logging methods. That is, they're using the whole idea that you go in, you clear cut, you plant the new crops that you want in a big group, and supposedly, one thing about quote-unquote modern forestry is they tout the value of. And what happens with that national forest, they log it using traditional methods, and that forest is dying. They are using their traditional methods of, clear-cutting areas and replanting seedlings and using herbicides and pesticides to make sure the wrong trees don't start growing. The national forest is dying. Right next to it, the Menominee forest, managed forest, is still continuing. And the reason is that what the Menominee do is they forest sustainably. That is, they literally have a catalog of every tree, because sustainability information is key to sustainability. Knowing what's happening in your ecosystem is essential to being able to manage your ecosystem so that it continues to support you. So they know every single tree on their property. Literally, they have a database. They have people that go around collecting information about them, how big they are, how fast they're growing, what's growing, what kind of trees growing where. And they only harvest the trees that are starting to fail, the trees that are starting to show signs of disease, the trees that are starting to die. And so that their theme, their idea is you take the worst and leave the best. And so what's happened over the decades is the healthiest trees have thrived. The more sickly trees have been taken out, and as they're taken out, that's the lumber that gets used. That's what gets taken in their sawmill and turned into lumber for sale. And so the quality of their lumber is getting steadily better and better. Their forest is one of the healthiest in the Upper Peninsula, and they're generating enough revenue to sustain the tribe. So that's kind of what sustainability looks like. And so this idea, you might tease me a little bit, oh, you've only earned $1 after 3 days of solar generation. Well, two things to say that. One, yeah, it's only $1, but over 40 years, if you earn $1 every couple days, that adds up to quite a bit of money. And two, well, it's been kind of cloudy and rainy. You might have noticed that. And contrary to the disinformation, solar panels do still generate power when it's cloudy and rainy. They just don't generate as much. So if we get a couple very sunny days here in a row, watch out, I'm going to be making like $2, maybe $2.50 in a single day. So, but anyway, that's a long time dream, finally realized. We are connected to the grid. That, to me, is a great example. It's taken us a long time to get to this point. We had actually taken out a loan back in 2016 to do this, and we've been talking about it since we got married, 36 years ago, but now it's finally a reality. So don't give up hope. If you've got ideas of sustainability, just never give up that dream, and you may actually be able to achieve it someday the way we have. Now, on to another topic, and that topic is not a dream. In fact, it's something of a nightmare. And a few weeks back, you remember, I tried to have a guest on from Colorado because there is a landfill there which has caught fire, and the fire is going to be burning for it's been burning for about 5 years. It's going to burn for at least another 4 or 5 years. And it's adjacent to a radioactive waste dump, a place where they dumped wastes left over from the Manhattan Project. Well, I had not fully appreciated, but we, right here in Northwest Ohio, we also have a leftover waste dump from the radioactive era of the Atomic Energy Commission and trying to build nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. It's just right down here in Luckey, Ohio. And there is a $226 million superfund cleanup going there because the soils there are contaminated with thorium-230, uranium-234, and uranium-238, as well as radium and a very nasty metal, which not radioactive, but still very nasty, called beryllium. And this is something that we should all be familiar with because this is the inevitable result of pursuing nuclear power. What happens is these wastes build up, and they end up contaminating areas. They end up kind of being forgotten. What's happened over and over again in the nuclear industry is that some business, some company thinks, oh, we're going to recycle nuclear waste. We're going to clean it up. We're going to make a fortune doing that. They get it on site. They get problems with contamination. They get workers that keep getting cancer and dying, so they have a high attrition rate. They end up going broke. And that's what happened down in Luckey. There was a company down there, and it was called the Brush Beryllium Company. Later it became the Brush Wellman Company, but they received 1,000 tons of radioactively contaminated scrap steel, and they were supposed to recycle that steel, but they couldn't figure out the process. They couldn't make it work, and so they abandoned the site. The Army Corps of Engineers has taken it over, and they are in the process of quote-unquote cleaning this site up. They're removing thousands and thousands of tons of topsoil, and they are simply shipping it up to a dump in Michigan. Now, I actually went yesterday, took my camera, and if you watch the YouTube version, you could see pictures of what's going on there. And it is an eerie place. I mean, there is this huge building there, this tremendous building, and it is falling to pieces. The walls are blown out. There's insulation dangling from the ceiling that you could see right through the building. Part of the roof has collapsed, and this is the building. Inside of there, they had this 1,000 tons of radioactively contaminated scrap steel, and that the radiation from these contaminated things has covered the whole site. They're digging out all the topsoil, and they've already got it down in one section. They've removed probably about 12 feet of topsoil out, I'm estimating. Shipped 5,000 truckloads of it so far off to Michigan to be buried. And it's going to cost, the whole thing is estimated to cost $226 million, and it's going to take another 9 years. That's 14 years and $250 million to clean up after the nuclear industry. And these are the kinds of costs that don't get included when they tell you how cheap and how practical and how inexpensive nuclear power is. And we're going to be coming back to that. But the reality is, and that this has contaminated Luckey, Ohio, and they're saying, the Army Corps of Engineers is saying, don't worry, we'll get it all cleaned up, blah, blah, blah. But there's things in here that are, as an environmentalist, the hackles go up on the back of my neck. One thing I did is I took my my Geiger counter with me when I went down there, and I didn't see any increased radioactivity that I could reliably measure with just a brief dive in with my Geiger counter. When I checked the ditches alongside the site, it did seem like normally the average count per minute for the Geiger counter, at least in my area in Bowling Green, it's about 18 counts per minute. Normally you can get up to 24 counts per minute, 26. And what that means is that we're actually constantly being bombarded by radiation in the natural environment. Things happen like radioactive particles zoom into the atmosphere from outer space, and they crash into the molecules in our atmosphere. And that, just like a cyclotron or a particle accelerator, that creates this shower of radioactive particles that shower down on us. And that's been happening, since the beginning of the Earth. And so there is some degree of natural, quote-unquote, natural radiation. And like I say, these particles, usually it's about 18 counts per minute. In the ditches around there, I was measuring 20, 24 counts per minute, which is still well within normal range. So I didn't find anything alarming right away in those ditches. But one thing that the Army Corps of Engineers says in their description of what they want to do with this waste is they talk about the groundwater. And they're saying that these radioactive isotopes have gotten into the groundwater. And what they say in their thing is, we're just going to let it naturally mediate. In other words, they're going to do nothing. Now, these isotopes, these radioactive isotopes, which are deadly, which can cause cancer and mutation and genetic diseases and even other diseases like heart disease. You wouldn't think it, but exposure to radioactivity can cause heart disease. But one of them, just here we go, thorium-230 has a half-life of 75,440 years. So that means you have to wait 10 half-lives or 750,000 years for it to get to a low enough level that you actually don't have to worry about it. Then another one, uranium-234, that one has a half-life of 245,500 years. which means you've got to wait 2.5 million years before it reaches a safe level. And finally, uranium-238, which is also in there, has a half-life of 2 billion years, which means you have to wait 20 billion years for uranium-238 to stop being dangerous and radioactive. And of course, as U-238 and as these other particles decay, they decay into other radioactive particles like radium and radon, and those radioactive particles also have half-lives. Some like in the case of radium, a few thousand years or a few hundred years, or actually even a few weeks. Some radium isotopes only have a half-life of a few weeks. But in other words, the Army Corps of Engineers, we've screwed that area. We've screwed the groundwater in the area in and around Luckey, Ohio, and it'll be screwed virtually forever. So that is something to think about when we're considering what we're going to do going forward in terms of energy. And I just want to say that this is a superfund site. This is being funded by the Congress. You and I, our tax dollars are going. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing this. We absolutely should. But we also have to remember all we're doing right now is moving this radioactive waste from just being out in the ground in the open. We're just putting it into a hole in the ground in Michigan. And those holes in the ground, those waste dumps, even with the most modern technology, which is lining the hole with plastic, they will all eventually leak. That plastic is not going to last the 2.5 billion years, or the 20 billion years, that you need to wait for uranium-238 to no longer be dangerous. So all we're doing is moving the contamination around right now. We're just spreading the misery around a bit. But the point I wanted to make is that the companies that generated this waste are long gone. The people that made their profits, the people that built nice houses and had wore good, nice suits and maybe had some expensive cologne, who got all the benefit of generating this radioactive toxic material, those people are long gone. And in human scales, they have died. I don't know if they died early or young. I don't know, but they're gone. And now we're stuck with their waste, just as we are sticking future generations with our waste. And I think it's immoral. And that's one of the reasons that I've created this show, is to talk about the fact that we need to put some morality into our economic, into our political, and into our environmental life by paying attention to the environment, to ecology. And one way and one place you can pay attention to environment is by going to one of our sponsors, to visiting one of our sponsors, and that is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, they provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There's several ways you can get in touch with the Wood County Park District. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, which is www.wcparks.org. And, of course, they have a wonderful app. And you just go to the App Store and search for WC Parks. And finally, of course, they have a Facebook page. So you can go on Facebook and just search for Wood County Parks. And there they are. And you can keep updated on all the cool things they're doing. And they're still doing cool things despite the COVID. And the value of these parks has become abundantly clear in the time of COVID. So please frequent our sponsor, Wood County Parks. And we also want to thank our patrons. These are people who've gone to patreon.com and they searched for a green future. And there they see different membership levels that pop up, and we're extremely grateful to our patrons. We couldn't have the show without them, and we'd ask you to become one of them. So that's patreon.com, and just search for a green future. Okay, now, speaking of moral things getting into our government, it's time for our environmental news segment, news and views. And one thing I wanted to do this week was an update on House Bill 104. House Bill 104, I call it the radioactive mutant son of House Bill 6, because what House Bill 104 would do is potentially turn all of Ohio into a Luckey, Ohio, in terms of being a radioactive waste dump. It creates a quote-unquote authority that wants to take all this waste from all over the world, all over the country, bring it here in Ohio, and mess around with it. Try to figure out ways to deal with it. And this is what we see. We see the result of that in Luckey. We see the result of that attitude in Luckey that we could take care of that. We could figure something out. Let's just pile it up here and we'll figure out what to do with it. And that doesn't work. And this story, the story of Luckey, has happened over and over again all over the country. West Valley, St. Louis, Rocky Flats, nuclear waste. We have not figured out what to do with it. We've been generating it for going on 100 years now, almost 100, just about 80. And we still have no idea what to do with it. And so House Bill 104 is a bill to turn Ohio into a radioactive waste dump. It creates an authority, quote unquote, who has more authority than the governor or the state government, that would deal directly with the federal government to be able to say, yeah, we want nuclear wastes here in Ohio, come put it over here. And they would have eminent domain rights to seize property, to put the nuclear waste on. It's really a horrible bill. Anyway, so it passed the House, passed the radioactive House, because, as we saw with HB 6, the House and the Senate look like they are in the pocket of the nuclear industry. And it passed the House. The Senate on July 21st had its first hearing. And the only person who spoke at that hearing was Representative Dick Stein. And Dick Stein is a Larry Householder clone. And when I say that, I don't just mean a clone in terms of political views and, attitude towards nuclear power and negative attitude towards wind and solar power, because he is a clone in that way. He matches perfectly. He hates wind, he hates solar, loves nuclear, hates geothermal, and he wants to make as many radioactive isotopes as possible. That's what this bill says. It's one of the purposes of House Bill 104 is to generate radioactive isotopes in the state of Ohio. So when I say clone, I mean he looks and is built and talks just like him. It was kind of amazing, because all this stuff with Larry Householder going on, and I keep thinking, is that Dick Stein? Because they both have that same boss man tweed build. I don't know if you learned in your history program, but back in New York they had a very corrupt person who ran New York City called his name was Tweed, and boss man Tweed had that same sort of, it's kind of like a bowling pin, you're kind of just this mass that there's the tapers at the bottom, and then there's this big bulge in the middle, and then the big head. So he was the only person who spoke at this hearing on July 21st, and of course he spoke in favor of it. And of course what he focused on is part of what the bill does is to say that Ohio is going to spend money, the state of Ohio is going to spend money to try to build advanced nuclear reactors. And advanced nuclear reactors are a myth. They don't exist. They're imaginary. But that hasn't stopped the government so far from wasting billions of dollars designing them. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that on our third Eco News topic. But right now I want to go on to, just finishing up with HB 104. The Senate will have one more hearing on it. The Senate subcommittee, this is the Subcommittee on Energy and Public Utilities. Then it goes before the full Senate. They have 2 hearings, and then they vote on it. And let's hope and pray it's just possible that in light of House Bill 106, since this was proposed by Callender, the Representative Callender, the same guy who proposed House Bill 6 in the House way back last year, that Jamie Callender, and it's literally the same people that pushed House Bill 6 through the legislature are pushing House Bill 104. Let's hope that all the scandal and the corruption and the depravity surrounding House Bill 6, let's hope the rest of the legislatures in the state run away from House Bill 104, because it's tainted by the same people saying, literally making the same arguments, the same phony arguments, to try to get another multi-billion-dollar handout for the nuclear industry. It's the same. That's why I call it the radioactive mutant son of House Bill 6. So let's hope House Bill 104 dies in committee, but so far it's still alive. All right, now, second story, Eco News story. And Russell, let me know when Rebecca gets on the line, because we'd love to have her perspective on these things. There is, in the Middle East right now, a heat wave. And you might say, oh, big news story, heat wave in the Middle East. That's like, say, water on the shores of Lake Erie. Well, this heat wave is kind of unprecedented even for the Middle East. It was, this past week, several days, it was 125 degrees in Baghdad. So just imagine that for a minute, 125 degrees. Some ovens, if you put them on warm, that's the temperature they go up to. So literally, living in Baghdad this past week was like living in an oven. And this was spread over the whole Middle East, 114 in Lebanon, 115 in Damascus, and the highest in Basra was 127.4 degrees. Now, 127.4 degrees will kill you. You go outside in that for any length of time, and you will die. So for several days this past week, the Middle East was uninhabitable. And just imagine 127.4 degrees, that's 51.7 Celsius, which means it was more than halfway to boiling water. You're more than halfway to having water boil just by sitting on your counter in the air. And so without air conditioning, humans can't live in that situation, especially since one of the things about this heat wave, which makes it different from other heat waves and from typical desert heat, is that it stayed over 100 degrees all night long. That is very, very difficult and dangerous and different, because usually the desert has very little humidity. So it gets really hot while the sun is up, but as soon as the sun goes down, it gets really cold, and everything cools off quickly because there's not enough moisture in the air to retain that heat, because water in the air is a greenhouse gas. In fact, it's more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. You just don't normally think of it as that because it's constantly going into and coming out of the atmosphere. But if you've got 127 degrees in the daytime and 110, 111, 105 all night long, unless you've got air conditioning, you are very likely to die. And another thing that's happened there in the Middle East during this heat wave is that their power plants are failing. And, of course, because high temperatures cause power plants to fail in a variety of ways. It's a combination of factors. One is, like with nuclear plants, for example, nuclear plants have to have cooling water, But when it gets that hot, the cooling water heats up and can no longer cool. So you have to shut your nuke plant down because you can't cool it down. You can't prevent it from having a runaway meltdown because you don't have enough cold water to run through the system. Another way it happens is that power lines are being used with intense amounts of energy because everybody's running air conditioners. And so they are heating up from that. And then if they're also being heated up to 127, 130 because they're wrapped in that black rubber wire, so they absorb solar heat, 140, 150, the power lines actually melt. They will sag and melt and break if they're in that kind of temperature for extended periods of time. So you've got no cooling water, so you can't run your plants. You've got your immense demand. That's also deadly to power plants. If there's too much demand and they can't meet it, they could fail. And you've got power lines failing. And so what's been happening all over the Middle East is that as these temperatures went through the roof, everybody's air conditioning failed. And so that has resulted in protests in places like Baghdad. And in fact, at least two protesters were killed this past week. And just think about that for a minute. These people are going out into the 125 degree weather to protest because they're absolutely desperate because they're stuck in their homes and their homes have become unlivable from the heat. And this is what's in store for the whole planet if we keep putting carbon into the air. So that is a big bit of news. And Rebecca, I understand you're with us finally. Hi.
I am. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's, I wish
your erected manti?
Yes. My erected manti has lifted my spirits. It's true. So. Oh, yeah, and anyone who wants to send me a tie, you just send it to P.O. Box 969, Bowling Green, Ohio, 43402. And I will wear it on the air, unless it's obscene, in which case I might wear it, but I won't wear it on the air or talk about it ever again. So how are you doing, Rebecca?
Not too bad here. I'm awake anyway.
Good.
Sort of.
That's always yeah.
In a manner of speaking.
I understand you might have a little poetry for us.
I do, yeah. I've not been writing very much lately, but I wrote this. It's kind of about everything that's going on and kind of about how it feels. This is provisionally called Tundra. The fires are always burning underground, encased in frozen spongy earth that swallowed mammoths, caribou, ancient spear points, fine bronze, warrior queens, and slaves bound for sacrifice. There are too many to put out, so we just light more scented candles and throw more bodies on the fire. The great white bears are ragged and yellowed and roam the alleys like feral dogs, fur hanging loose. And miles below, the granite plates skate over magma. The rock you built your house on is no more than a thin scum of ice on a farm pond. The skin you peel off a bowl of pudding. The surface tension maintaining a drop of water by the bonds between molecules, locked arms of hydrogen and oxygen against the batterings of gravity. As we hold back the tears and walk forward over burning turf, steadied by the pressure from our neighbor's hand, not wanting to be the ones that break the chain.
Wow. That's a great poem, Rebecca. I love that poem. I think you should be the resident poet for the radio station.
I totally should. Yeah, what's involved in that? Just look vaguely artistic, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and you have to come up with the
going on crazy.
Poetry.
I can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we were going through our eco news, and I only have one more story to get through. And I'm actually half a story here. We've been following the proposal to build a gas plant right in the middle of Ohio State University. They're going to have a second hearing on that on August 4th down there in Columbus. So I know a lot of people, like our guest that we had on the one we talked about this, Becca Pollard and others, are going to be testifying there. And let's hope they stop it, because natural gas, we see what we saw in the Middle East this past week. What happens if we keep using the natural gas? These 125-degree weeks are going to become more and more common, and we've got to stop now. So no waiting. And that actually,
like a soap opera. It's like a soap opera called "End of Our Lives."
That's a great one, Rebecca. Yeah.
Thank you.
like molecules of CO2 in the atmosphere.
There you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
End of our lives. Wow. That's great.
I'm in a mood today. You'll have to excuse me.
Yeah,
a little Mary Sunshine.
Yeah, I wish we had a week like we did 2 weeks ago when all 5 news stories were good news, but not this week. Got to report it as it is.
Well, it's nice and cool at the moment up here.
That's true. Our heat wave has broken. Right. We are in some nice weather. Carol and I were out walking in it last night. It was great. We were actually a little chilly at the start, so that's nice. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, this is a call-in show, 866-240-1065. We would love to hear from you. Give us a call on any environmental topic. And you might want to call in on this topic that we're going to talk about next, because this is a big deal here in this election year. And like I say, I'm not going to have a lot of time to go into much detail. We're going to have to talk about this more in a future show. But I've taken a quick look at Joe Biden's $2 trillion climate action plan. Now, of course, in the interest of equal time, Trump's climate plan is to put as much carbon in the air as quickly as possible and make global warming as serious as he can, as fast as he can. That's the Trump plan. So there's the equal time. Now Biden's $2 trillion climate plan, of course, compared to that, is much, much better. But there's some problems with it still. One, he talks about improving the infrastructure, which is great, but he starts out talking about roads and bridges, which, if you want to fix the climate, you don't build a whole lot more roads and bridges. In fact, speaking as an ecologist, we have too many roads. All these roads take energy to maintain. A lot of these roads are very seldom used, and you can get to places, especially in rural areas, that you can get to without using all these roads. I think we should be looking at where we can practically, without causing problems, eliminate roads and replace them with wildlife and forest paths, because you can connect things like parks and wildlife refuges with old roads in a lot of these places, and it would vastly improve our ecology. But that's just my improve. But anyway, he's talking about roads and bridges. One really good thing is that they're calling for every city of 100,000 or more to have zero emissions public transit right away. They want to invest in that. That's a good one. We've been talking. Go ahead.
It's kind of interesting whenever you push for public transit so poor people can reach the place where jobs are. We always get this, but there's not money we're not a big enough city. We don't have a big enough budget, so we can't have that bus that you need to get to work. It's never, we have to close down the bridge or the or the road or the highway that the middle class person uses to get to work.
It's a commute. Mm-hmm.
Even though, like, you get these outraged expose stories about how some of those buses allegedly don't have enough people on them. But if the road doesn't have enough people on it, it gets maintained anyway, even though it's a big waste of money.
Yeah, it's true. There's been a pro-car bias, and so this is a very good point in his plan. Also, they want to do a lot more insulating and weatherizing, which should have been done 20 years ago. They want to do 4 million buildings and 2 million homes, which is really not ambitious enough, frankly. but at least it's a start. And conservation is probably the best form of preventing the release of global warming gases, because once you've insulated, you don't have to keep generating more energy. It just saves you energy. So it's the cleanest, literally the cleanest. And so that's a good thing. They want to build 1.45 million new sustainable homes, quote unquote. Don't know what that means. Don't know if we really want to encourage building lots of new homes and clearing lots of land and cutting down trees to build lots more real estate developments. We can't grow our way out of the climate crisis. Some people think that the way out of the climate crisis is to just increase everything we're doing already. We have to be very smart. We have to only build in places that already are cleared. We have to we can't be cutting down the last of the forests to build new houses, even if they're sustainable houses, whatever sustainable means. So those are some of the good things. Unfortunately, the bad thing, the really big bad thing, well, two big bad things. One is stated explicitly, and one is just in there, and that is fracking. They're still going to allow fracking because what they want is to stop using carbon for electric generation in 15 years. So they have a 15-year window for getting rid of carbon generation for electricity, which is too long. We can't take 15 years to do that. But then they have 120 years until net zero. That is 120 years until we stop putting carbon in the air for everything: heating, agriculture, transportation, and that's a death sentence. So this plan is nowhere near ambitious enough. But one of the worst things right up front: advanced nuclear. He wants to waste billions and billions of these $2 trillion trying to develop advanced nuclear, trying to do the same thing that the people who had it Luckey, to somehow figure out a way to take all this radiation, this antithetical to life technology, and build lots of it. They want to build lots and lots of these advanced nuclear reactors and put them all over the place. They want a reactor down the street from you. Literally, they want reactors covering the country, and that is a big fat no. And the other one, of course, is the fracking. So they want to keep going on the fracking. So Biden's plan compared to Trump's plan is fantastic. Compared to what we actually need, it's insufficient, and compared to the addition of advanced nuclear is a death sentence. So we're going to have to.
And this is the thing. We're coming up on a deadline here. We're coming up on some hard deadlines, and we can't afford sort of, oh well, it's not as bad. We can't afford that anymore.
Mm-hmm. No,
not as bad as the same thing as doing nothing.
Right. And of course, the ironic thing is that all over the world, other countries are doing it properly, kind of like our COVID response. They are.
Yes.
They are putting in wind, putting in solar at a fantastic clip, and they're finding as they do it, they can replace all their coal and all their natural gas faster than they thought they could, because it turns out as you keep doing it, you get better and better and more efficient at it. And so there's countries that just a few years ago were saying, well, we're going to have to keep our coal plants around for about a decade or so. They're already shutting them all down, because It turns out, as we environmentalists have said for 50 years now, when there's enough energy in just the wind and sun to meet all our needs, and we don't need to go and keep these nuke plants around. We don't need to build new nuke plants, heaven forbid, and we don't need to keep fracking around. We just have to get serious about making the transition to wind and sun, and unfortunately, Biden's plan is not there yet. So it just means that if he's the one that gets in, we're going to have to keep fighting, even if it's a Democrat in office, because nuclear is just unacceptable. All right. Well, last week I got interrupted reading the letter from the future. So this week I think I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole thing through. And yeah, and take my time and do it properly. So here we go. Okay, dear GGG. Well, I'm just about to finish my hike from Bowling Green to Cincinnati on the Slippery Elm Trail. I'm sitting in my camp just north of the city. In your time, I would have known I was getting close to the city by the sound of traffic and smell of pollution. The first sign I had I was getting close was the sound of an outdoor concert. Some of the classics from your time are still played today. Sweet Caroline and Brick House are two examples. But modern music would look and sound very strange to you. I say look because here in your future, artists integrate holographic technology and sound in ways that would probably blow your mind. We enter the world of a song rather than listen to it. So it was strange to be walking among the trees of the trail and just hearing music drifting through the branches. It made me feel like I was back in your time. To tell you the truth, I don't want this walk to end. It's been very healing for me. I almost got my full strength back, but I'm ashamed to admit that part of me doesn't want to go back to Zapoliarny. I've had so much trauma there, not just the radiation exposure and the loss of the baby, but Michael is there, and I can tell he needs my help in his recovery. I've actually stayed an extra day in my camp. I could have finished the walk yesterday. I even considered turning around and walking back. But the way is forward. Someone has to deal with the nuclear waste generated in your time. The people of your time didn't. Someone has to clean the mess up, or humans won't be able to survive on the Earth. So, back to work. Love, Marie I. So, there we go. I guess next week we'll be hearing from her back in Zapoliarny. And,
I'm a little upset. The first bad news I've ever heard from these letters of the future is that Sweet Caroline survived. That's really only a fun song when you're very, very drunk.
Well, it's the future isn't necessarily a utopia. I mean, they have problems and they have things they've got to deal with.
I'm beginning to see that now. Yeah.
Yeah. So
maybe we can get like letters from the future from Marie I's great grandchildren saying about the struggle to eliminate Sweet Caroline.
Could be right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a couple minutes left here, Rebecca, and of course, if anyone wants to call in, we got time for one call at 866-240-1065. Oh, House Bill 6, right. There's a little more updating on House Bill 6. There have been proposals to repeal it. They have actually been introduced in the legislature, and there's especially one by 2 Democrats who initially voted against it. Theirs is just a straight repeal, so that has happened. Whether or not these are going to go anywhere, because right now they're focusing on getting rid of Householder. Oh, and by the way, Householder, he has been removed as Speaker of the House, but they took a vote on whether or not to remove him from the House, and that vote failed. So, don't worry, you corrupt legislators. You might still have a shot at keeping your job as a legislature, even if you get caught doing something horribly corrupt. Yeah. But House Bill 6, the vote to repeal them, the bill to repeal them has been introduced, and now is when we have to push to get it actually carried through the legislative process, because with these scandals, lots of times they like to do big showy things up front, but then once the attention's gone, they just kind of let them slide. We cannot let this slide. So, well, with that, we're out of time. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off. Country run, but that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting.